Okay, so this may be the first video I do that is not New England or Boston related. It's the Antonio Brown saga. I believe this was about a week ago, and no, yeah, it was about a week ago, and they had this little segment on First Things First, where they were discussing Antonio Brown's behavior in Pittsburgh and possible landing spots and stuff like that. And I just want to go over a couple things before the video starts. One thing is, I only watched like the first 10 seconds of the video, so I know what he's going to talk about first. But Chris Carter's going to make a point that the Pittsburgh Steelers allowed Antonio Brown to be a diva for so long that he just expects it to be okay because they've allowed him to do so thus far. I both agree and disagree with that assessment. I agree with it that the Pittsburgh Steelers did allow Antonio Brown to be a diva and, to think of himself as the almighty entity instead of thinking a team is the entity that he's a part of instead of him being the main attraction and the team just following his every step. Now, the part that I disagree with, I believe that it's the culture in Pittsburgh, the reason why Antonio Brown feels he can act this way and say these things and do these things, because this is the culture that they have allowed there. Since Mike Tomlin has gotten there, slowly but surely, even though this team is extremely talented, it has been in a constant just midst of disarray and confusion and just mistrust and just irresponsibility. I mean, it's just a whole bunch going around. It's not just Antonio Brown. They're going to try to make it seem like it's just Antonio Brown and it's just him being him. No, it's been like this for a very long time, and Antonio Brown is just a product of the culture that they built up in Pittsburgh. Who's responsible for building up the culture in Pittsburgh? Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin is the problem. I believe I did a video on Mike Tomlin already. Anyway, if you recall, some time ago, Ben Roethlisberger was accused of rape. I don't know if he was ever... he wasn't convicted, but I don't know if it ever went past... I don't think it ever got to trial or anything like that. I didn't hear anything about it being false or anything. I just didn't hear anything about it at all. That's the culture, man. That's the culture. And excusing a couple things, you don't hear New England going through shit like this. There's a few things that happened, that whole Aaron Hernandez thing, but I believe there was a whole lot of things revolving around that whole situation. I'm not going to get into that, but Mike Tomlin, man. Mike Tomlin is the problem. Pittsburgh will never get back to where they were when Bill Cowher was there, unless they get rid of Mike Tomlin. And I've had this conversation with people before, and everybody keeps saying, "Oh, Mike Tomlin, he's doing a great job there. He's a phenomenal coach." I'm not saying Mike Tomlin is not a good coach. First of all, he's not a great coach. Second of all, he has been the lucky recipient of some of the best talent that the NFL has seen, I guess. Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, Emmanuel Sanders. Who's the other guy? Jesse James is also a big time player. Who's the guy before? But and some pretty good defensive players. I was thinking about somebody, but I just chose to move on. Also, Mike Tomlin won his Super Bowl on the back of the team, on the back of the build that Bill Cowher was able to accomplish while he was there. Because I believe Mike Tomlin won the Super Bowl his first or second season. That team that was there when he was there. That team was already built. The foundation was already set when Mike Tomlin got there because of Bill Cowher. So everybody's acting like Mike Tomlin is some great coach. Nah, man, look. Mike Tomlin is a good coach who can definitely coach good talent to great talent. He can't coach him to the Super Bowl, though. I mean, since his first Super Bowl appearance, we have yet to see this. Well, no, we've seen him get back one more time, but we have yet. I think 2009. We have yet to see him get back since 2009, and arguable. Sorry, it's arguable that Mike Tomlin has had the best team out of the last 9 years. He's had the best team at least 5 or 6 out of those 9 years. Because when you look at their team, the cream of the crop, Antonio Brown is the best wide receiver in the NFL. Le'Veon Bell, even though he has injury issues, everybody keeps considering this dude to be the best running back in the NFL. I believe he's top 10. When he's healthy, he's good. But when he is healthy, because Le'Veon Bell is hurt a lot. Also, Ben Roethlisberger, who's not as good as he used to be, but he's still a viable option over some of the other quarterbacking talent across the NFL. And then you people give them a hard time about their defense, but that defense can make plays. They have playmakers on that defense. So there's so much talent on this team. What doesn't make any sense is how come Mike Tomlin can't translate that from the practice field to an actual game. Like, there's supposed to be this big rivalry between New England and Pittsburgh, but every time Pittsburgh faces New England in the playoffs, it always goes down one way, New England beating them. And that win that they had in a regular season, it's whatever. Even when it happened at that point, I was like, it was a bad game by New England, but it's whatever. It's not like the Steelers are going to take that and run with it, go on a winning streak, make the playoffs, and win the Super Bowl. It's not like that's going to happen. So that win meant nothing. It meant as much as the Dolphins beating New England on that what was it, Hail Mary play, or that last play where that bullshit where they got it into the end zone. The Pittsburgh win mattered just as much as the Miami win. So Mike Tomlin has a lot of issues, man, as far as that team goes. And I think Pittsburgh needs to move on. But I think they're afraid to move on because right now they're doing just good enough to make the playoffs and look like they're really good. But they don't do anything past that. And instead of them moving on and risking it and trying to find a coach that can get them over the top, they rather stick with Tomlin because Tomlin is doing just a good enough job to make people think that he's doing a great job. And he's really not. So let's hear what Chris got to say.
It didn't come to this just over one argument. It's just like anything else, any other relationship that falls apart. Typically, when the breakup happens, you get into the blame game. Well, whose fault was it? It's their fault. It's not my fault. No one wants to look at themselves. But the Pittsburgh Steelers and Antonio should take some blame in this. The Pittsburgh Steelers, because it's their organization, and they've done things a certain way, but they have decided to allow a player who happens to be a wide receiver, and that happens to be AB, over the years, bend the rules, no different than a child. So when the child realizes that the parents aren't going to enforce the rules, or one of the parents is easier than the other one, which Mike Tomlin, everyone says he's a player's coach. In the press conferences, he acts like he's a tough guy, but he's running that locker room in a totally different fashion. And when Mike Tomlin took over the Pittsburgh Steelers, people forget, 34 years old, taking over a veteran team with plenty of patience and knowing that the organization was going to support him. He won the interview process. They were going to hire someone else, but he won the interview process, so they hired him, took a chance on him. They got the right guy. But let's not forget, he was a young guy that took over a veteran team with a great organizational support. So that's part of the reason why he's had success. But how he's dealt with AB and allowing him to get away with a number of things, disciplinary things, being late to meetings, changing the rules where he could sleep somewhere else at training camp. And yes, for star players, do they do certain things a little different? Yes. But when you start to lose and the younger players start to see this, it starts to eat away. So guys start to take exception and be like, well, why can't I do it? He does it. So that's what's happened in Pittsburgh. So the Pittsburgh Steelers are at fault. And Antonio, he is at fault because through the years, he's gotten worse and worse, even though on the field, he's gotten better and better. Listen,
All right, now to go over what Chris Carter just said, which was a mouthful. Listen, man, when you have a kid that's bad, that's just bad. You don't blame the kid at a certain age. You don't blame a kid. You got to blame who's raising the kid. You got to blame who's teaching the kid some of the things that he's learning or she's learning. And you have to put the onus on the parents because it's the parents' responsibilities to make sure that the kids are being taken care of and the kids are learning what they need to learn, and anything extra, they're teaching the kids how to avoid that type of behavior. That's on the parents, man. And if you're going to compare a 30-year-old man to a kid, then he shouldn't take the blame because he is a product of the culture that they built there. I agree that Pittsburgh need to take the onus, but I don't agree that, look, if you're going to make that analogy, you have to go 100% with it. Antonio Brown only does what Antonio Brown does is because that team allowed him to do it. And it's not like he's the only one. And a lot of what Chris Carter was saying, it sounded like he was inferring that Antonio Brown is the reason. Antonio Brown is like the only one, and he's not. He's not. Go back and look at James Harrison, the interview he did when he was on Undisputed, I believe, when they were asking him about the difference between New England and Pittsburgh's locker room, and listen to what he says. It doesn't sound like he says, oh yeah, man, I was up in Pittsburgh. When I was up in Pittsburgh, man, it was a circus. And it was all because, it was all because of one player. He didn't say that. He said the culture is different. The culture was different. The things that you're allowed to do in Pittsburgh, you're not allowed to do in New England. The things that you get away with in Pittsburgh, you don't get away with in New England. Players are 100% more committed to play. Listen, if you're going to blame anybody, it needs to be Pittsburgh, man, because Antonio Brown is just he's an example. He's not the whole thing. He's just the example. And there are plenty of players who had behavior issues going to that team and coming out of that team. So you can't really blame him. You can't blame him. I mean, because if you give me like $25 million a year and I know that I'm the best at my position and you're allowing me to be as cocky and as showboating as I want to be, I'm going to do it. If I want to, I'm going to do it. And if you're not stopping me from doing it, if you're not stopping me from being a distraction, if you're not stopping me from doing these things, I'm going to do it. It's like if you got a kid in your house that you allow to stay up whenever they want, eat whatever they want, say whatever they want, do whatever they want. They don't have to go to school. They don't have to do shit. The first time Antonio Brown shows up late for a meeting, he gets he gets like a couple days. He's banned from the stadium. Bam. Go home. Stay home. When you come back, I want a different attitude. He shows up late for another meeting, suspended for a game. Shows up late to another meeting, suspended for 2 games. Third time, you're suspended for 6 weeks. Seriously, you have to treat these players like that. Especially, look, when a new coach goes into Pittsburgh, man, they're going to have to do a lot of re-engineering to those players, especially the young guys. And if you think that Juju Smith-Schuster is not going to start acting the same way if he becomes one of the top wide receivers, you're fucking retarded. This is a culture, and that's what a bad culture does. It's not just one person displays a certain behavior. Everybody displays that particular behavior. Because I'll give you a recent example. Ben Roethlisberger went during an interview, press conference, whatever, and he started throwing Mike Tomlin under the bus. Why would he do that if it's just Antonio Brown? Unless Antonio Brown told Ben Roethlisberger to do that. How is that Antonio Brown's fault? You're quarterback. The starter, the dude that's been on your team since what, 2003, 2004, who's won you 2 Super Bowls. You made a shitload of fucking playoff appearances with this guy, future Hall of Famer. He throws his coach under the bus. Whose fault is that? But you won't hear them talk about that. For some reason, it's Antonio Brown's fault.
On the field, these are two separate things. Because on the field, the production is unquestioned and unprecedented. But off the field, to use both of your analogies,
and that's the only reason why they allowed him to do what he's been doing, is because he has been playing unbelievably well on the field. When he Facebook Lived his locker room, showboating after that win against who was it? It was a win against some team. It was right before they played New England. I believe it was the Texans or somebody. But he played this team, they beat them, and then they were moving on. And Antonio Brown was Facebook Living the locker room. Obviously, Mike Tomlin at the moment didn't know about it, because it looked like Antonio Brown was on the other side. Like, there's 2 sections of our locker room, and Antonio Brown was on the other side, behind the locker, so you couldn't really see him. At that moment, when you realize that he did that, he should have sat his ass down for the New England game. He shouldn't have played. If he wants to be traded, fine. You want to bitch, fine. But you're going to sit. At least for this game, you're going to sit. And that's how it should have been approached. But it wasn't handled like that because he's the best wide receiver in the NFL. So now, and the only reason why they're bringing all this shit out now is because Antonio Brown wants to leave. He doesn't want to be there no more. He wants to get traded. So now they're going to try to throw him under the fucking bus and make him look like the bad guy. It's just like what they did to Deshaun Jackson when they traded him, and how they just started saying all this shit that they wasn't saying before they decided to get rid of him. Now that they got rid of him, now they want to fucking start bringing all this shit out and throwing all these stories out to fucking discredit him, or to affect his ability to earn the money that, you know, his play has earned him. And that's why loyalty don't fucking exist in sports, man. Loyalty does not exist. At the first sign of trouble, they will throw your ass under the bus. And that's what they're trying to do to Antonio Brown. Now you got every fucking news outlet, sports news outlet, making him look like some fucking, like some ridiculous asshole who's nothing but a clown, who has all this talent in the world and is squandering it by acting like a fucking idiot. And that may be true. But he's not the reason that locker room is like that. And he's not the reason why he's acting like such a fucking diva. That locker room is. You don't see this shit happening in New England. And if it starts happening in New England, Belichick gets rid of those players. So, yeah.
And stretch them further. You said like with a child, like with a kid. You extend the bedtime 15 minutes. About 2 weeks later, I want another 15 minutes. Like you immediately get used to the adjustment and ask for more and more and more. And like a relationship, if you don't address the root causes of the arguments, even if you might go a couple months without an argument, even if things are going great, you're winning football games, you're making all pro teams, those root causes are still there. They never address Antonio Brown's growing sense of entitlement, and it seemed like they never addressed he and Big Ben's almost, dueling, we need each other but don't necessarily like each other relationship. And so as AB continued off the field within the Steelers organization and outside of it to make more and more reckless decisions, this was almost inevitable.
And it's hard, even for Ben, with all his experience and his leadership, being a captain, all those things, Super Bowl champ, all those things. It's hard to be critical of the players when the coaches aren't being critical. And that's one thing, man. I remember when Dennis Green, when we had our biggest problem, it was when I decided to chastise one of my teammates,
and Dennis didn't support me. And at that point, I knew my days were numbered in Minnesota. I knew I couldn't stay there but so long. And this is just a prime example of, if you're a parent, if you're trying to run an organization, hashtag do what you want to do. Because that's what AB ended up. In his 8 years watching this relationship, they let him do what he wanted to do. Get to practice whenever you want to. Get to the building whenever you want to. And when you do that, this can only be the end result. They're lucky that they got the superior play out of it. And that's the reason why this took so long, because he works so hard. He spends so much money on his body. His performance on the field, Julio Jones, is second to none. Those are only two people you can talk about over this span that you can say, man, these two guys right here are on the level that no other receivers are on in the NFL.
And the other element to it, and I'm glad you mentioned, the production, because Mike Tomlin I don't think gave this quote himself, but he was quoted by a player as saying, it might have been Ryan Clark, I'm not sure, as saying, we will put up with it as long as the production's there. And so
that right there is the prime example. You allowed this to happen. This culture that you built on this team allowed Antonio Brown to do what he's doing now. So how can you blame him? How can you blame him? When Ben Roethlisberger came out and said what he said about Mike Tomlin to the media, he should have been sat down. You should have sat his ass down and then, went on to the backup quarterback and just went on like, everything is normal. He should have been sat down. That's how you set a president. Nobody, I don't care what your name is bigger than what we're building here. And they didn't set that. They didn't set that from the outset. You gotta set the ground rules from the offset so people know. And it needs to be respected. And how do you show them that it needs to be respected? Everybody is up for scrutiny. Nobody is being allowed to just do whatever they want to do. And that's not the example that they set there. And now you have a fucking circus of fucking great players who just, they do what they want. Do what thou wilt. That's what you do. That's what you want to do. I'm allowing you to do it. And whose fault is that? That's Mike Tomlin's fault. That's not Antonio Brown's fault.
Antonio Brown
but that's not necessarily right either.
I think it obviously turned out not to be correct.
Of course.
My point is, if in any workplace, if you have incredible faith and confidence in your ability to produce, and you don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon, and you have heard either directly or indirectly, they're going to let you act however you want, as long as you keep producing, then why would I change my behavior as long as I believe I'm going to still produce?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so you're going to let me, when everyone's living in these terrible dorms at training camp, get an Airbnb? You're going to let me occasionally skip walkthroughs?
And if Nick Wright, because I remember I did watch this interview or this segment, but if Nick Wright would have kept with that thought, he would have ended up with the conclusion, even if he didn't say it out loud, and I'm pretty sure he ended up with that conclusion anyway, that this is not Antonio Brown's fault. This is the team's fault. And they all probably know this. But the narrative is Antonio Brown is at fault. So, I'm going to end it right here, but Mike Tomlin is, once again, a good coach, but he's not a great coach. He's not a guy that I could depend to turn my playoff caliber team into a championship caliber team. And the only reason why he won that Super Bowl and went to another Super Bowl is because that team was already built. The infrastructure was already there. How you test the true mettle of a coach is when all those pieces that they inherited, once all of them are gone, how do you rebuild from the ground up? And Mike Tomlin didn't do a good job, man, because the main thing you need to establish a good team is to establish a good culture, man. And he didn't do that. He allowed those players, because they were super talented, to do whatever the fuck they wanted to do. And the moment it went south, now you want to blame them and it's all their fault. So, all right.